Today, I'm going to talk about my experience living in the US and China. I'm going to talk about different aspects of societies in these two countries and how was my experience. Let's talk about safety. When it comes to safety, I think China overall is a safer country. Let me explain to you. During my time in the US, I live in San Francisco Bay Area. That is one of the richest and most prestigious area of the whole US. And you have the most prestigious universities. You have like Stanford University, Berkeley, and you have Silicon Valley there that are very prestigious companies there. So it was very like it could be very rich area that you think there's a safe place there because there's lots of wealth there. But during the time I lived there, I got robbed 3 times. My stuff was stolen 3 times. One time my car was stolen, one time my bike was stolen, and one time my backpack was stolen. But when I lived in China, none of this happened to me. Plus, I did not think that if I leave any of my belongings in public place is gonna disappear or is gonna go where someone's gonna steal it, especially something like cars that is not even something that is easily stolen, but they stole my car in the US. So from the this aspect, I think China is safer. Also, if you want to walk at night, is almost impossible to walk at night in the US and you feel safe because there's no other people usually walk at night in the US, and overall it doesn't look like that. If you walk in dark valley and there's no one there, probably is not going to be safe for you. But in China you have streets that usually are alive. It means people are just shopping up to like 10, 11 p.m., and there are many people in the streets. There's light, and people are safer just to go out at night and walk. Compared to the US, I felt after sunset, everyone go back to their home, and it's kind of most of the cities that I visited is like that. After sunset, when it get dark, it just everyone goes home, and it's like there is no nightlife. And I think maybe one reason is people don't feel safe to go out. I don't know. Please write your opinion in the comment section. And this is the safety. And I think in China, because there are two aspects of culture that allow the society to be safer than US. One aspect is cultural, that people don't look at action of stealing something as positive at all. They look at it as very negative. And second is you have many cameras everywhere that if someone steals something easily, they could be caught. So there's just two reasons I think cause that the overall safety is lower, and because gun is not available to ordinary citizens in China, there is no gun crime there. Um, but in the US, there's like mass shooting almost every day. I see that there's sometime in the news, mainstream media, they report on the mass shooting. But if you go and look it up, every week almost 2 3 times there's mass shooting, but is not reported. So is kind of there's gun crime in the US compared to China. Another aspect I'm going to talk about is about culture. I think in the US is a very individualistic country. Means individuals, they have their own bubble that they live, and they don't share the bubble they live in with anyone almost. Only people that they think they could be accepted to that bubble, they would be allowed in. But overall, the society is not very, how can I say, like, interconnected. So you have higher level of individualism in society, but in China is more collective society. So families mostly care about each other more overall. And you see, for example, especially now, when you have grandparents, like the older generation, there are many people that are in older generation, they take care of their grandchildren, and they're more like some family even live with each other. Means you have grandparents, parents, and grandchildren, they live in one place. In contrast to the US, I heard from one of my friends that at the age of 18, uh, his parents asked him to leave home and go become independent. And that was too much for him. It was put so much stress and pressure on him. So it's kind of different in this aspect. Another aspect I want to talk about is cost of living. I think overall, in China, cost of living is lower than the US. What do I mean by that? I mean certain necessities that everyone needs in life, for example, housing, shelter, transportation, food, these very basic necessities, is more um, accessible by majority of people. More people could have access to these basic needs. But when it goes higher, for example, some people want to have luxurious type of life. So that's gonna be different, of course. But when it comes to basic needs of uh, citizens, I think cost of living for everyone is lower for basic needs. In the US, I think the cost of living, it fluctuates a lot based on the state you live in, and the price is high, has a good reason the price is high. For example, if you want to live in a state that there are not lots of opportunities, or the weather is not that good, or there's other issues, of course the prices are lower. But if you want to have just a normal life, that you have some jobs or you have some safety, I think you need to pay more for the safety of your place of living. So it means in order to be safe, you need to pay higher and live in better neighborhoods. Another subject I'm going to talk about is technology. I think technology in China is more advanced than the US. When it comes to everyday's life, integration of technology to everyday's people's life, I think in China is more integrated. For example, if you want to pay for anything, digital payment is almost everyone use digital payment for paying for the groceries, for their shopping. When it comes to some technology that, for example, you go to a restaurant. For one time, I remember I went to a restaurant that was a traditional Chinese restaurant, but there was robot that bringing our food. So it was like mixture of tradition and modernity, if you want to look at it that way. And is the technology in everyday's life is more advanced than the US. Now with the coming of software, AI software like DeepSeek and other technology like that, I think overall Chinese technology is more advanced than US technology. And those technology is usually for the betterment of the whole society. As I feel in the US, the technology is only benefiting very small percentage of population. So if imagine if you have access to very expensive electric cars, of course you have access to new technology, but not everyone could pay for a very expensive electric car. Since there's 100% tariff on electric cars that coming could come from China and bring down prices, everyone could use it in that. Not everyone, but most people could use it. Is more affordable, but because there's a 100% tariff on those cars, so only like higher echelon of society could pay for those electric cars. And I think the technology is more advanced and is more accessible to every day's life and helping people to live a better life. Another thing I want to talk about is travel. I think China is more travel friendly. What do I mean by that? For example, in the US, if you want to travel from one state to another, there's a few options that you could take a high speed train with a lower price to go from one state travel to another state. And when you go to that state, there is no transportation, so the only option you have is either you need to drive with your own car, or you need to fly to another state and then there rent car. So overall the expense is going to go higher compared uh, when you have high speed train. You could just take high speed train, go another city in China, and then when you get to another city again, there's a transportation system that is not that expensive. So overall you could travel more with lower expenses. So it's kind of is more travel friendly compared to the US. um, and another aspect is China has 5 tier system for their cities. For example, they have tier 1 cities. Those are like Guangzhou, Beijing, um, Chongqing, Chengdu, those cities, Shanghai. Tier 2, tier 3, tier 4, they have 5 tiers. So the higher tier goes means is less developed, or um, is not as rich as those tier 1 cities. But overall I travel to tier 4 cities. There I travel to tier 1 cities. I lived in tier 2 city, and my experience wasn't that different. So it means although they're different cities, it's not like you go from one city to another or one province to another and everything changes so dramatically. But in the US, you don't even need to travel to another city. Inside one city, for example, Oakland, California, inside one city, you have one area of Oakland that is the most expensive part of whole Bay Area, and you have other part of Oakland that's not safe at all. So inside one city, you have completely different situations. But in China overall, uh, the whole country is more like look alike in terms of safety, in terms of expenses, in terms of accessibility, is like that. Another um, thing I'm going to talk about is about education. I think one area that US still is ahead is university education, especially those majors that are not STEM majors. Means like social sciences or in some other areas that are not STEM majors. I think they have better universities, more advanced, but when it comes to universities, STEM majors, I think China is catching up very fast to a degree. I think right now more papers, more STEM papers come out of China, and more patents come out of China than US. But when it comes to first 12 years of education, I think China is like they didn't abandon more um, traditional type of education that children go through harder training, especially for like science and math. So in that aspect, I think they get better training in STEM subjects in the first 12 years of their education. And so in that area, kind of they're better than the US. The US is kind of is not that good in these areas. Another issue I'm going to talk about is about drugs. Because of the British opium war on China, so Britain wanted to do business with China but didn't want to pay for their whatever they bought from China. Before they received silver, China received silver from British Empire for whatever they import to Britain and British colonies. Then Britain didn't want to pay with silver, so what they did is they forced them to buy opium, and this caused um, many people in China to get addicted to opium and lead to century of humiliation. You could read it in history. So this event is very sad part of Chinese history. That's why they have very strict rules when it comes to drug. But in US, I think it get even more accessible. For example, in recent years, certain drugs being legalized. Another subject I'm going to talk about is multiculturalism in US and in China. The experience I had in US was, although many people from all around the world come to the US, but first they usually move to certain states that are either in the East Coast or West Coast. And so they're more concentrated in these two areas. And because it seems like because they need to get assimilated with certain cultures here, they don't seem to share their own culture that much. So I have friends from different cultures, but usually they don't share their own cultures. But if I ask them and I'm curious to know, they may share about their cultures. But the time that I lived in China, it seems like people mm, keep their own culture, and is not that different from the way they behaved in their own country, or the manner they had usually is like more preserved. I felt it that way, that when you meet people from different countries in China, their own culture is more preserved and they're not shy of talking about their own cultures, and they're kind of sometimes proud to talk about their own cultures. So in that aspect, I feel like China is more multicultural society, because you get to know people from different part of the world and you learn from their cultures. In US, although there are more people from different part of the world, it seems they're not willing to, or I don't know what is the exact reason, but people usually get assimilated with the mainstream culture here in the US, and is like everyone become, as they call it, melting pot, because when something melt, it loses its character. So that was another experience that I had. These are were my experience living in the US and China that I share with you today. Please, please write your experience and share your thoughts about my experience in the comment section. Thank you so much. See you in the next video.